Welcome to the 30-minute hour. It's the personal development podcast for the seven-figure entrepreneur who's looking to level up and become unstoppable. I'm your host, Eric Twiggs, your procrastination prevention partner, and I've coached over 28,000 seven-figure entrepreneurs. Joining me, as always, you know him as the super CEO, the business strategist extraordinaire, and all-around good guy, Ted Fells.
Thursday. Happy Thursday. Just good to be here, man. You guys week had a good week, Eric? How was your week?
It was a good week. It was I got summoned to jury duty, and that could probably be a whole other show for another day.
Yeah. Wow. How about you, Dave? How was your week?
My week's been fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Had a really interesting conversation on Tuesday with JT Fox, if you know who that is. I had a one-on-one Zoom call with him, and so we're talking about some stuff. So, all in all, great week so far.
It's only going to get better because today we're going to talk about how to break through to a better version of you. Yeah. That's our theme for today. You know, a lot of times you have to go through certain things and then come out on the other side much better. And we've got the perfect guest for that. I mean, he's got the whole Firewalk thing that he's helped Tony Robbins with for years and all that. But I'll give him that formal introduction in a second. But definitely, you'll understand what it means to go through something and then come out better for it on the other side, and just really come out with a different mindset and a different approach. So we look forward to getting his input on how that whole process works and what he's seen from other entrepreneurs. But this is not your everyday podcast. We do things a little different around here on the 30-minute hour. We have quite a few people watching us live now on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. And don't forget, you can go back on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and check us out there, any of those other podcasting platforms. So now we're going to, again, talk about how to break through to a better version of you. Our guest today, back in 1988, found himself addicted to drugs and alcohol. So he joined Alcoholics Anonymous, and this is where he was introduced to personal development, into the whole personal development industry. He attended a seminar with Tony Robbins in 1995 and did his first Firewalk. Right, he walked on the hot coals. We're going to talk about that. And then he went on to work for Tony Robbins for 20 years or so as the Firewalk captain. He retired from Anthony Robbins Companies in 2014, and then he was hired by Google to put on an event for them in Mountain View, California. And then Firewalk Productions was born from there. He's done gigs with NASA, Heineken, Entrepreneurs Organization, you name it, he's done it with them. Please join me in welcoming to the 30-minute hour podcast, David Albin.
Hey, what's up, man? And what did we say? We've never met a Dave that wasn't a good guy.
Man, let me tell you, that's it. Dave is a good guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when Ted brought that up backstage, I had to really think, and I'm like, he's right. All Daves are good guys.
I've never met a Dave that was a jerk.
So I have to share this for the listeners, because they're probably like, well, how do we just spin off into this Dave thing? I was saying when we first met Dave, I said, man, my best friend in elementary school, first grade, his name was Dave. He was a really good guy. And I didn't tell you all this part. So Dave was like a principal in one of our middle schools back in our old neighborhood. And we reconnected on Facebook about probably 30 years. And he's still a real good guy. Nothing's changed.
You know, I went with the flow. You know, I named my son Dave Jr. So, you know, to keep up with the tradition, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, it's an honor to have you on the show.
Thanks,
I did want to give people kind of the backstory of how you got to this point. So let's talk about your childhood. And I know you went through some challenging experiences. Let's talk about that. Like, tell us about your childhood and how that shaped you into who you became.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for bringing up that part because it's important to me. It molded me. I was born to a single mother. My mom was, during World War II, she was known as Rosie the Riveter, and she built airplanes, right? When all the men were off the war, the women were home doing everything, right? They were building tanks and Jeeps and airplanes, and my mom worked for McDonnell Douglas. And after the war, she met my dad, and she had already had 2 sons from another man, and we were in Hollywood, California. And 2 months before I was born, my biological father, who served in Korea as a pilot, we don't know what happened to him, but something happened, and they had to put a plate in his head to save his life. And that saved his life, but it also took his life because he had a lot of pain with that plate. And so 2 months before I was born, my dad told my mom he was going to the grocery store, and we never saw or heard from him again. So mom gave birth to me, and now she had 3 sons. She was living with my grandmother and another cousin. We were all living in a 1-bedroom apartment across the street from Hollywood High School in Hollywood. And when I was 5 years old, my mom just wasn't making ends meet. She was working at the Roosevelt Hotel in Hollywood as a server. And so she did a very loving thing. She put me up for adoption. And her sister, my aunt, right, adopted me, Bob and Pat Albin. So I moved from Hollywood to Long Beach. And it was great. For the first 6 years, I had the perfect life. My dad that was raising me now, Bob Albin, was a decorated military officer in World War II. Had a great guy. We went camping. We did things together. It was wonderful. And then on the first day of summer in 1964, my mom brought me into the kitchen that morning and she said, "David, sit down. Your dad and I need to speak with you." And she put her hand on my hand. I'll never forget the look in her face and the tears coming down. She said, "David, what we need to tell you is we're not your parents." And it's like, what do you mean you're not my parents, right? 11 years old is pretty hard to process that. And she went on to tell me that they were my aunt and uncle. They adopted me when I was 5, and that my biological mother was actually my Aunt Dean. And I'm thinking, I don't even like her. It's like she always wanted to be close to me. She always wanted to touch me and hold me and kiss me. And, it was never anything inappropriate. It was always a loving thing. And now I know why. She was my mother. Of course she wanted to touch me and be around me, right? Well, that day changed my life forever. And shortly after they told me this, both my parents that were raising me started drinking. And it got ugly real fast. And so one day they went off to the grocery store. Back in those days in the 60s, you could leave your kids home. Nobody said anything, right, at 11 years old. You just called the neighbor across the street and said, "Hey, Joanne, Bob and I are going to the store. If David needs anything, can he just come on knocking on the door?" And Joanne's like, "Of course." So everybody did that back in the early 60s, right? And so they left. Well, I knew where the booze was because I watched them go over there and drink it. And I was watching these 2 really amazing people turn into it was just ugly. There was no other word for it. So I went over there and I opened the cabinet and I pulled out a big old half-gallon of brandy. And I took a coffee cup, I filled it up about halfway, and boom, I downed it. It smelled horrible. I almost gagged. And then within a couple of minutes, I felt like I just poured rocket fuel into my body. I'm 11 years old. And you know what, you guys? I never had a chance. I was an alcoholic right on the spot. I started thinking alcoholically. I wanted more. I'd steal it. I'd hide it. And it just progressed and it got worse and worse and worse. And once I got into my teens, I started experimenting with drugs and then hard drugs. And by the time I was a junior in high school, they pulled me into the principal's office one day and said, "Albin, you're out. You're done. You're leaving our high school. You're expelled." And I'm like, "Okay, see you guys later." Went out and got a really good job that day. But it progressed. It got worse and it got worse and it got worse. Had a couple of marriages. And then on June 8th, 1988, I woke up that morning. I said, "I'm done. That's it. I'm out. I can't do this anymore. I was in so much physical and emotional pain that I needed to end my life. I mean, that was the only option I thought I really had in that moment. Grab your pistol, load it, put it in your mouth, and pull the trigger. And as I'm contemplating that and preparing myself for that, I was married to a woman who had 3 kids. I was her stepdad. And I remember thinking, dude, you cannot do that to those kids. You love those kids. They're good kids. And, you know, that you're going to kill them too, right? And so in a last minute thought of compassion, I said, you can't do that. You got to find another way. You got to figure out something else to do. And the next thing I know, I said, okay, call Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, you know what's interesting, you guys? I didn't even know who Alcoholics Anonymous was. I had no references. I'd never been to a meeting. I never knew anybody that was in AA, and yet there was the thought. And so I called, and a woman answered the phone, and I respectively and I, lovingly refer to her as Madge, because Madge talked like this, right? She was, I think she was probably smoking 2 packs of Pall Mall non-filters every day, right? And she heard enough for me. She called one of the members, and this guy came and picked me up. His name was Lauren. Took me to my first AA meeting. I went to 4 meetings that day, at 12:30, at 4:30, at 6:30, and at 8:30. They took a big book. They all signed it. They put their telephone numbers in there, and they wrote at the bottom, before you pick up that first drink, you call one of us. And so my career started. And so one day turned into 2, then a week, and then a month. I got a chip for having 30 days. I got one at 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and then I got the proverbial 1-year chip. Well, while this was all going on, I had insomnia. My sleep patterns were all over the place. I was rough. And I'm recovering from alcohol, cocaine, heroin, all of it. And so I had a really hard time sleeping. So there I was one night up at 3:00 in the morning, and there's the man himself, right? A young Tony Robbins in 1988, selling his personal power program. And it's a month program, right? And in fact, when you bought it and they sent it to you, it came on these little white things called cassette tapes, right? And so I plugged it in. I went through the program. I did what the man taught me to do, and it worked. And to fast forward that, 7 years later, I find out Tony Robbins is coming to town. I want to go. I get a ticket. I'd heard in the pre-frame, as I was buying a ticket, that we were going to do a firewalk. And I said, well, maybe some of those idiots are, but I'm not going to do that. And so I dismissed that. But you get to the event, right? Tony takes the stage at 2:00 in the afternoon. Well, the next thing I know, it's after midnight. And all of a sudden Robbins goes, take your shoes off. And I'm like, oh no, you're not tricking me, pal. Well, I'm in a room with 3,500 people. And so what are they doing? They're taking their shoes off, right? And I'm like, you guys, no, don't fall for it, right? And so now I've got a dilemma. Take your shoes off or don't take your shoes off. And if I don't take my shoes off and I walk outside with 3,500 people, they're going to see I didn't take my shoes off, and they're going to know I'm a coward. So we can't have that. So I just said, well, take your shoes off, and when you get out there, go hide in the back. You don't have to do this firewalk. Well, next thing you know, as Tony's getting ready to take you out in this big giant parking lot for the firewalk, he gets everybody to start clapping and chanting, right? So they're like, yes, yes, yes. And that's 3,500 people. It's loud. Well, it gets worse, because as soon as you walk outside, he's got African drummers. So now it's the clapping and the chanting and the dun, 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 dun. I mean, you guys, it's intense. There's nothing like it on earth that I know of. Well, when you get out there, he's got a giant fire over here in the corner. It's huge. It's massive. It's like 30 feet wide, and it's 70 feet long. And they've been loading wood on it all day, 8-10 hours. So it renders. And at the end of the night, around midnight, as you go out there, there's this giant pile of coals. Well, how they set that up logistically, for 3,500 people, they would take wheelbarrows and they'd fill them up with coals. And then they'd bring a wheelbarrow and they'd lay 2 lanes of sod, a fire lane. And so the sod's like, the grass is like 3 feet long, 3 feet wide, and about 18 feet long. And what they did is just take a flathead shovel and they would sprinkle the coals on top of that grass. And that's what you walked on. Wow. Well, I'm in the back. I'm hiding out, right? Well, Tony knows this is a profound experience. He knows there's a paradigm shift inside that Firewalk. He knows it's one of the most incredible, life-changing experiences a human's going to have, right? Been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. Well, so I'm hiding in the back. Well, he knows people are hiding in the back. So he trains some of his people to go find you, literally. And sure enough, this guy comes out of nowhere and comes up to me and he looks at me and he says, looks at me kind of funny. And I must have had a funny look on my face. And he said, "Hey, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good." Right. And then he said, "Well, listen, you're going to walk tonight?" And I said, "Absolutely not." And he goes, "Hey, man, that's cool. We don't want you to do anything you want to do. It's all right. But let me ask you a question. Wouldn't you at least like to watch?" And I thought, well, yeah, I would. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go watch these people burn their feet off. And so I got in line. And because I was 100 yards away, Eric, right? I couldn't see anything.
Right.
And I got in line. And the next thing I know, this guy comes up to me and he goes, "He knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go." And this guy went pew and just disappeared into the night. I'm like, what was that? Where did this guy come from? And again, I'm just kind of walking along. I can't see anything in front of me. Got hundreds of people in front of me, but I get to a point where I can see at an angle. And they're doing it, man. And they're screaming and yelling and celebrating the drums, the intensity. There's nothing like it on earth. It's intense. Well, I'm kind of mesmerized. I'm looking over here and I can see him doing it at an angle. And next thing I know, boom, guess where I am? Front of the line. And now I'm staring into the abyss. And I'm scared to death. My heart is pumping out of my chest. And so, all the coals are glowing bright red. There's a wheelbarrow right there too. You can feel the heat coming off. And I'm staring. And all of a sudden there's a trainer there and he goes, "Eyes up." And I bring my eyes up. It's like, whoa, I was in a room with Tony for 10 hours. And guess what he teaches you to do? Keep your eyes up, right? Don't stare at what you fear. Keep your eyes up. Look to the celebration end. That's where the reward is. And so all of a sudden he says, "Squeeze your fist and say yes." And I went, "Yes." And he went, "Stronger." And I went, "Yes." Well, the trainer could tell I was leaving a lot on the table. I was not in a peak state yet. So he screamed at me. And it really kind of ticked me off. And I threw my hands in the air and I screamed, "Yes." And he goes, "Go, go, go." And pew, I took off. Well, here's the first thing I learned about firewalking. When you take the first step, kind of metaphorically like life, right? When you take that first step on a fire lane, you'll definitely take the second, third, fourth, and fifth, right? You're not going to stop. And so he positions two people at the end of the lane. And they stop you. And they're like, "Stop, wipe your feet and celebrate." And I'm kind of wiping my feet. And all of a sudden, it dawns on me, oh my gosh, I've burnt myself really bad. And I look at my foot, right? And it's dirty, but there's no burns. Oh, it's my other foot. I look at it. It's dirty, filthy dirty, but there's no burns. And so now I'm looking back and the coals are bright red. I just walked over them. And I just walked over coals that are 1,000 degrees and I did not burn myself. And here's what's interesting. I have no idea how I did it. None, zero. But
so I'm curious.
Huh?
So I am curious. So
sure.
You walk the coals, and I've seen that, he does that. Like when you got on the other side, like how did that impact your mindset?
Oh my gosh. You think you're invincible. You think you can do anything. Your confidence level, your self-worth, self-confidence, self-belief just goes through the roof. And you're sharing that same thought process with 3,000 other people. That's what's interesting about it, right? So it's exhilarating. But you know where it gets really interesting, though? Was the next day, right? Because this is a 4-day event, and we do the Firewalk the night of the first night. And in day 2, you all come into the foyer and you're waiting to go into the venue. And that's what got me. I'm standing there with 3,000 people, and it's unbelievable what's going on. People they're so connected humanistically. And because our vibrations have been raised at such a high level that we're all connected. This was unbelievable. And people are laughing. They're crying, they're hugging, they're talking, they're communicating, they're talking about the Firewalk. And you guys, I've never witnessed anything like this in my life other than a Tony Robbins seminar. And that's what got me. I was all in at that point. And so I found out later that Tony uses a lot of volunteers. And one of his trainers said, hey, when you get home, call Robbins in San Diego. They'll send you an application, fill it out, send it back. They might select you, because he uses like 300 volunteers at every event. And I did that. And a month after I filled it out, I got a letter in the mail. It said, Dave Albin, congratulations. You've been selected to crew with the Anthony Robbins organization in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And that was it. I was in. So they found out I had a security background, a military background. So I started helping taking care of Tony's celebrities. I had a farm, so I knew tools, and I could use pieces of equipment and operate them. And so they put me on the fire team, and I think I crewed 4 or 5 times. And the next thing you know, they offered me a subcontracting position to not only help take care of Tony's celebrities, but they offered me the assistant captain's position, working directly with the captain. And that was 88, 89. Excuse me, that was 95, 96. And then in 2003, Robbins offered me the captain's position, that I would take over all of Tony's firewalks globally. Wow. So obviously that was a life-changing moment. He even paid for my family to travel with me. My daughter was 6 years old. My son was 9 years old, their first firewalk in New York. And then the next thing I really remember that was profound was in 2005, we went to London and we set a world record. We firewalked 12,300 people. Big firewalk. Wow. And I was responsible for the whole thing. Now, I want to disclose something for your listeners. I say a world record. Guinness Book was not there. However, to my knowledge, there's never been a firewalk anywhere close to 12,300 people, unless, of course, it was a Tony Robbins seminar where we did 7,000 or 8,000 or 9,000 or whatever. And so, yeah.
I want to stop you right here. So I'm just curious, like, the lessons you learned from this whole firewalk experience, and even what you see from the ones you administer, what are those lessons that apply to the entrepreneurs that are listening to us? Like, what can those entrepreneurs take away from the firewalk experience?
Well, a lot of that, some of that content comes from Tony directly. I think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I talk to EO all the time. I did 5 gigs for the entrepreneur organization last year alone. And one of the things I tell entrepreneurs is say, man, listen, there's something you got to get balanced, which is achievement versus fulfillment. And there's an art and science between both of them, as most of us know. And you're not going to get to the end of your life and say, wow, I wish I'd have spent more time making money and less time with my family. You better get that dialed in. And again, like Tony says, you can achieve at a really high level, but if it's not balanced with fulfillment, it's total failure. So I think for me, proximity is everything. Who we spend time with, right? Love your family, choose your friends, because you will become who you spend time with. We see that in AA. We see that in entrepreneurial relationships, because if you take your 5 closest friends and you average how much they make per year, you're probably within about 10% of that. So I like to say, love your family, choose your friends. The other thing is, I think one of the number one things, especially for entrepreneurs, is patterns. Understanding them, acknowledging them, and then learning when to interrupt them. It's so important, right? Like a pattern, like you come home every day and you don't spend time with your kids. That's a pattern. Well, you better recognize it and you better interrupt it and you better do something about it. The pattern when, with eating, with exercise, with everything's a pattern that we run. And Tony will tell you that's one of the most important distinctions in your life. Other than, of course, the other side is that everything that happens to us, whether good, bad, and different, doesn't matter. We create a story about it. So create a good one. You want to change your life? Change your story and hang around the right people and understand patterns. It'll make all the difference in any entrepreneur's world, in any entrepreneur or CEO's world. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's great. And you bring up the thing about change your story. And Dave, here's what fascinates me, right? Like, I know of people who have a tough upbringing, and they had the thing with the parents, and And they always use that as an excuse as to why they don't excel. But you have literally taken that and had tremendous success in spite of what's happened to you. What do you see as the difference? Why is it that some people use that as an excuse, then someone like you uses it as fuel? What's the difference there?
Well, I think Viktor Frankl explained that pretty well in Man's Search for Meaning. Right? He got out of Auschwitz. He made it out. And they killed his family right in front of him. You're standing naked and it's below freezing outside. They take everything from you, everything. But here's what they can't take from you: your attitude. I remember seeing a short documentary one time, and they went into a prison and they interviewed this guy, and he was in the cell and they were talking, and he was telling his story, and he was talking about how badly and sexually abused and physically abused, and he was horribly abused. I mean, bad. It was really, really ugly. There's no doubt about it. And the more he would tell that story, the more he would go into that pattern of storytelling. And he got really angry at the end. And he's like, and you know what? If you were treated the way I was, this is where you end up. And then they broke away, right? Well, the next thing you know, the camera is an aerial shot of this big, beautiful home, circular driveway. The camera comes down, the doors open, the camera comes in, a couple of kids go running by. You see mom in the kitchen. You could almost smell the chocolate chip cookies, right? And then there's dad sitting in his easy chair, takes his paper, puts it down. They start an interview. That guy said almost the exact same thing. Horribly sexually abused, beat. They starved him for weeks at a time. It was horrible. Just absolutely horrible, horrendous. And at the end of the interview, you know what he says? And you know what? If you were treated as bad as I was, what else could you do but become an amazing father and an amazing husband? Well, then at the end, they put it on the screen. They were brothers. Right?
Wow.
So one went to victim land and the other one said, I'm going to make something of my life. So it's in our moments of decision that our destinies are shaped. So, we hear about it all the time. Look at Oprah. She was horribly abused as well.
Yeah.
And she chose not to play the victim card.
But I see it even with like entrepreneurs where,
sure,
let's say they lost that big account. Yeah. And then every time you're talking to them, they have to tell you the story about how they lost the big account.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
You know what? Others, they lose the big account and they find another one.
Yeah. Okay. Bring it on. Come on. Michael Jordan taught us that. He didn't even make the high school basketball team, right? So, and I saw an interview here not too long ago with Tom Hanks, and he was talking. Robert De Niro was there, and there were 3 or 4, pretty big stars here, and they're just sitting at a table talking, and it was kind of like, so, Tom, if you could go back and have a conversation with your younger self, what would you tell yourself? And Tom thought for a minute, and he goes, "This too shall pass." Right? He goes, "Things going good? You think you got the world by the you know what? Everything's wonderful. This too shall pass. Everything horrible, feel like the whole world's crashing in on you. This too shall pass." And I think that's a really, really strong lesson in that, just wait it out. I know for me, I've dealt with fear because of all the firewalks and all that. But, what's the acronym? Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. We've got a choice. I like what AA says. False images appearing real.
Yeah.
Almost everything that I've ever thought of I thought that was bad, that could happen to me, never happened. Right?
Yep.
So, yeah.
So I think that definitely helps your mindset when you've walked over the hot coals.
No doubt about it.
I'm sure you build it up in your mind about how terrible it's going to be beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, speaking of Oprah, she firewalked in 2010. If you go watch the video of her, YouTube Oprah's firewalk, go watch it closely. It's profound. You will learn a huge lesson by watching one of the most successful people on earth do the firewalk, because before, she's doing exactly what you said, Eric. She's freaking out. She's losing it. She's like, oh no, oh my gosh, I don't know. I stay too long. I mean, we don't really need to do this. Well, her Sherry, who was in charge of Harpo at the time, well, she's there with her, right? And so Sherry starts going, come on, Oprah. Tony's not going to let us get hurt. We got to do this. We need to do this, right? So she's over there cheerleading for Oprah. And all of a sudden, Oprah goes, You're right, Sherry. We need to do this. Yeah, we need to do it. All of a sudden, Sherry goes, well, now hold on a second. Right? So the next thing you know, Oprah's getting ready to firewalk. And so Tony gets her up to the staging area, and he goes, fresh coals. Right? And so my assistant, Bill, who took over the firewalks after I retired, he had to lay down more coals for her. And she's like, oh no, right? But he says something really profound to her. And she's sitting there and she's contemplating. You can see it. She's terrified, right? And this is pretty common. When you watch her firewalk, this depicts what a lot of people go through. And all of a sudden, Tony goes, Oprah, what's the worst that can happen? Burn your feet off and die? Come on. I'm not going to let you get hurt. And she made her move. She did 3 power moves and off she went. Well, when she gets to the celebration end, she loses it. I mean, she goes nuts, right? Well, she leaves that area and she goes over and the cameras go with her. And here's the beauty. She makes one of the biggest business decisions of her life within seconds of doing the firewalk. And you can hear her say it. She said, this is the next chapter, people. This is the next chapter. And that was the moment that she decided that she was going to create the next chapter.
Interesting.
It's a beautiful thing to watch.
Wow.
But see, you know what I mean? You got to think about the state you're in.
Yeah.
You're in an unbelievable peak state. And that's where we should make decisions from, especially entrepreneurs and CEOs.
Right.
They know that they need to be in a peak state, right? If you're an MMA fighter, you don't go, casually walking into the ring. Those guys are trained and professional athletes. They are physically just, you know what I mean? We all see that. They don't gonna go, walking along. Okay, here I go. I'm gonna go kick his butt now. It's like that doesn't happen, right? So physiology and a powerful state, which I like to call state management. When you can manage your state at that level as a CEO or entrepreneur, you'll make really good decisions.
So other than walking across the hot coals, what else can entrepreneurs do to get themselves in that peak state?
There's a lot of different ways, actually. Meditation works really well. Being physical in the gym. You notice most entrepreneurs and CEOs, one of the characteristics you'll find about them, they're in good shape. They keep their body in good shape so that when the time comes, they're physically ready to do whatever. The other thing they do is they challenge themselves really hard, right? Almost kind of like Navy SEAL kind of stuff, right? Because what doesn't challenge you isn't going to change you. So maintaining that focus. I think the other thing too for them is in and around delegation and surrounding themselves with good, competent people. I think leadership to me really boils down to a couple of things. One is when you can get people to do something that they wouldn't normally do for themselves, but they will with a little encouragement from that leader. So those kinds of things. The other thing is, they have regiments. They're disciplined. They get up every day. They make their bed. They'll take a cold shower. They'll read 10 pages in a good book every day. They'll eat a really nutritional breakfast. They'll drink good, clean water. I mean, you know what I mean? So they're constantly looking to to be the leader that I want to be. What do I need to do today to serve myself at a high level and serve those people that work for me? And so, those are all things that are pretty super important. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
No, those are all good points. Hopefully our listeners were taking notes, because I think the state is everything. I even look back when I look at times where I did a presentation and I didn't feel like it went that well. It was usually because I wasn't in the right state. Something was off with my routine. I wasn't in that. So I think that peak mental state piece is critical.
When most of the speakers that I work with as keynote speakers, when we're in the back, right in the green room, before we go on stage, we are, boom, man, we are moving. We are we're getting our physiology going. We got our blood going. We're jumping up and down on rebounders. We're taking control. And so that and Tony does this every time. He's got this physiology thing, almost like an MMA fighter, that he does every single time. Every single time that man walks out on that stage, he goes through that ritual. And so when he gets out there, as you said, he's prepared. His mind's prepared. He's used to it. Every molecule, every cell, everything in his body is aligned so that when he takes the stage, he's going to stand and deliver at a high level.
Absolutely. No,
that's critical as a leader. Like you always have to be on. I had a mentor say to me that as a leader, you only can have like 3 type of days, like good, great, and excellent. Whatever,
That's right.
It's like that's got to be it, right? Like
I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Your team has got to see you, always like we can do this. Like, you now if you're feeling some kind of way, you got to get that over before you get in front of them, because they, really follow you. And one of the things that's happened with me, recently after, being in business 20 plus years is now, within the past year, I've brought on a real young core team. Like everybody's like in their 20s. And it's a different type of discussion that I have to have with them.
Yeah.
Like it's straight like, let's go. We can do it right. And they're just like, let's go.
That's right. I love that. Right.
And that's what they need. Now, some of the the more seasoned folks, I guess they don't get as excited by that. But those guys, man, that's what they love. Is I have to, even though I'm laid back, I have to press that button to give them that, because that's what they need, and it gets them going.
Well, there's such a responsibility as a CEO or as an entrepreneur, as you guys well know. We're out there by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little lonely out there. It's a little scary out there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also exhilarating, right? Because it's who we are at our core. And so after, the pandemic and the mask and the vaccines and everybody arguing over, political sides. And I mean, what a mess. Well, inside any company, if all that dissension is going on, if people are like, hey, mask wearing, well, he didn't wear and he got a vaccine, and all that just ripped companies apart. And you guys know this, right? And I'm sure most of your audience knows this too. And that is, if you don't fix that, that could cost you millions, maybe billions. You got to keep politics out of your business. Because if you go out and you make a claim because, I love Donald Trump. Well, I hate Donald Trump. Well, 50% of your marketplace just decided that they're not going to do business with you. That's not smart business, right? Just encourage them, motivate them, inspire them, let them see that you're a leader. That's what they want to see. They don't care about anything else, right? From my perspective, I don't care how successful someone is. Right? I don't want to hear about it from being on stage. I just don't. You know what I want to hear about? And Eric, you talked about it at the beginning of the podcast, and that was, tell me about your struggles and how you overcame them, because we're all going to have those.
Yes.
And so I think one of the things a CEO and an entrepreneur can do is be vulnerable. Tell them you screwed up. Go tell them your worst day in business. Go tell them some of the worst things you've ever done in your life, because you're a human, and that's what people want, right?
Yeah.
In fact, that's why I started the Dave Albin Firewalk Academy. One of my mentors came to me and he said, Dave, you need to create an academy and train people to do what you do, so you can broaden your outreach here, so you can change more people's lives with the Firewalk experience. And I went, wow. You know what? You're onto something there. So I did. I got my first academy coming up in October of this year. So we bring in 10 people. That's it. We keep it real small, real intimate. I bring them up here in the Appalachian Mountains where I live, and I rock their world. But I teach them all these experiences. I teach them how to go back and change all their people's lives, how to inspire, how to encourage, take them through their fears, their greatest fears. Teach them, do a firewalk, do a glass walk, board break, brick break, arrow break, rebar bend, whatever it is. Again, you've got to create an experience that's gonna affect the central nervous system. Because if you don't, it's not going to be lasting change, right? How many times have we ever gone to a seminar and there's a really good speaker on stage, and a week later, if you came back and say, "What was your greatest takeaway?" You go, "I don't know," right? However, you do a firewalk, you'll never forget it ever. It ain't going to happen.
Now, it's hard to forget walking on hot coals.
It is indeed. I remember mine, like it was yesterday. I remember, what you remember? Every little detail. It's like, at 9/11, right? We all knew exactly where we were, what was happening, everything about it. Well, the firewalk creates that kind of an emotional attachment, right? Because again, it lifts your vibration. And you can the smells, the sounds, the visuals, all of it. And so that's why it works. And it works every single time. Because when a CEO comes to me and he goes, "Dave, I got some stuff going on. We're at an all-time low." Okay, give me your people for 3 hours. And let the fire do what the fire does. Trust the process. I had the board break to it as well, right? I take them through the board break. So and the firewalk at the same event. So we take the board. It's a martial arts move, right? Any dojo, any martial arts studio breaks boards, right? I create a really powerful experience with it, though. I have them write something on front of the board I want them to move towards, or they want to move towards. Something on the back they need to stop doing, to move away from. Then I have them write anybody's name on that board that they're in conflict with. If forgiveness and reconciliation is needed, put their name on the board. It ends tonight. And then I create a rite of passage. And how I do that is I have them write anybody's name on the board that they've lost. So they break the board. We go out to the firewalk. They do their firewalk. They come back around, and then they add the board to the fire. And there's something else I do out there. It's kind of proprietary. I tell when clients call me, I tell them about what it is. And so it just anchors it in. So that next Monday, when everybody comes in, those people are getting along. Because we reduce it back to being human, right? And that's
so when people are calling you, is it because they see that maybe their team, they've got limiting beliefs that they can't get past? Is it
sometimes
they've got fear that's holding them back? Like what are the primary reasons that people are calling you at Firewalk Productions?
Well, great question. I don't think I've ever been asked this before. They call me for 3 reasons. One, they're kicking butt. Everything, they're firing on all 8 cylinders, and they want to take it to the next level because there's always another level. Or that things are really bad. Things are they're circling the drain. They better get on it. They better get it fixed. They better get it fixed fast because everybody's arguing and not getting along, and production is down big time. And then the third, somewhere in the middle. So it's never the wrong time to put on an event like this. Because if you want to encourage your people and you want to inspire them and you want to create a life-changing paradigm shift in all of your people simultaneously, this is how you do it. And that's why Robbins used it. Come on, he's one of the greatest life business coaches on earth. He did his research. He knew Firewalk has been around 1,000 years. The Tahitians, the Polynesians, the Hawaiians, the Native American Indians, the Indo-Europeans. The Indo-Europeans used to do a firewalk before the warriors would go into battle. They would do a firewalk the night before. And if you didn't do the firewalk, you weren't allowed to go into battle, which would dishonor your family. The people of India, you ought to see their firewalks. Holy mackerel. So, Tony knew. He knew it would work, and it's worked now for over 3 decades. He's influenced millions of people with that firewalk. And I've heard their stories. I know it works. It's not a question if. You ask anybody that's ever been to a Tony Robbins seminar and you ask them, so what do you remember most about that event? The firewalk. Right? Because it is. It's the most profound part of the event. Now, here's the thing, though, and he uses it because the next day, when you go into day 2 of his event, he asks you that morning, "Good morning, firewalkers. So you walked on coals over 1,000 degrees last night. What else can you do? What else? What other lies have you told yourself that you can't do? Fear's a liar. And you've got to be able to understand that pattern when because fear took a lot of things from me growing up. Fear doesn't win anymore, not with me. Because again, what's the acronym? Face everything and rise, or forget everything and run. So you decide, we decide.
Right.
And that's why, and I've been an entrepreneur since I was a kid, selling flowers on the street corners, shagging golf balls at the golf course and riding the perimeter and finding them and selling them in the parking lot back to the golfers. My paper route. So, I love entrepreneurship. There's so much freedom there because, you can really get to a point. You can go where you want, when you want, as often as you want, with whoever you want, anytime you want. And so my encouragement to any entrepreneur CEO is just make sure that you set aside time to spend it with your family.
Yes.
You tell your son or your daughter you're going to do something, do it. Don't give them an excuse, because that happened to me. One day I was working in my office in my home, and back in the day, and my son came in and said, "Hey, Dad, can we go play catch?" And I said, "Yeah, let me finish up what I'm doing." I didn't do it. I told him I was going to do it, and I didn't do it. Next day, same thing. Davey Jr. came in, said, "Hey, Dad, can we go play baseball, throw the ball around?" I said, "Yeah, Davey, let me finish what I'm doing, and I'll go do it." And he goes, "You said that yesterday, Dad." I vowed to myself, I will never, ever let that happen again, because you don't want to get to the end and succeed, right? You don't want to get to the end and succeed like that and achieve and then have all these regrets. Get it balanced, get it dialed in, ladies and gentlemen.
Goes back to what you said, achievement versus fulfillment. And really fulfillment is really where it's at. So you're on podcasts all the time, right? You get asked all these questions. Like what's a question that you never get asked that you wish people would ask you?
What's the secret to life? And I think boils down to two things. The most important time, there's two most important times of our life: the moment we were born and the moment we figure out why. Because at the end of the day, if we go back generationally in our ancestry, if we go back 12 generations, which is about 400 years, guess how many people sacrificed like crazy for us three to be on this podcast today? 4,094 people. And like Grant Cardone says, every once in a while, someone in that lineage of people, somebody rises up. And I believe that you can take your family in a whole different direction when you did that. I did that when I got sober. My family went in a completely different direction, a completely different trajectory because of that decision that day not to take my life and ask for help. And I think that's another one that I never get asked about. And that is, what's one of the most intelligent things any human being can do on this planet? And that is be willing to ask for help. We know it's a very intelligent thing to do, because yes, you're going to get help, but you're helping that person that you ask. I mean, look at Mother Teresa. That's all she did. She did nothing but help people. What did she own? Nothing. So, ask for help. It'll help you, and it'll help yourself. And it's a wonderful thing. And that's how AA works, right? I mean, is asking for help. So yeah, beautiful thing. Thanks for that question. That was really cool.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome answer. And
no, the question was cool. The answer was real cool though.
Absolutely.
Well, that's another thing, right? Brilliant people ask great questions. Outstanding, brilliant people have good answers. Right? So yeah. You can have a good answer, but it comes down to, man, the question is everything. The quality of the question, ask a quality question, you'll get a quality answer.
Yeah.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is this is another one of those episodes, Ted, that could go on for hours, but we know Dave has other things to do.
Dave's a good guy. Dave will hang out with us as long as we need him to.
I'm all in with you guys right now, man. This has been cool. Yeah. I'm good.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah, absolutely.
no man, this is great information, and this is one you just want to go back and rewind and listen to, and make sure you didn't miss some of these key points. So we're at this final segment. It's called Write This Down, and this is where we each go around and share at least one takeaway from this episode that we want the people to write down so they can level up. So, Dave, you are our guest of honor. What should the people write down from today's show?
What do you want? Write it down. Get clear. Get it in front of you. Create a vision board and get it into your nervous system. Clarity is power. Knowledge and wisdom is not power. It's potential power, because you're only going to get what you do. So yeah, write it down. Get clear about what you want. And you know what? If your goal, it doesn't scare the hell out of you, it's not big enough.
Yep.
Go for it. Absolutely go for it. I teach that at the academy. We spend like an hour in this realm right here, in this subject right here. What do you want in life, man? Because it's out there. So just commit to it and then follow through. And even if you don't hit it all the way, when I do my events, I put a picture of a guy by the name of Eric Weihenmeyer on the back of the screen, right? And as I'm talking through and I'm going through my keynote, eventually I'll come back and I'll say, so my buddy here in the back, who can tell me where he's standing? But it looks pretty obvious. He's standing at the top of Mount Everest. And because he's on kind of a peak, he looks cockeyed, right? He looks like one leg is longer than the other. It looks like there's something really physically wrong with him. His knees, his hips, whatever it is. And I'll say, so who here can tell me what's wrong with this man? And they'll go, it looks like he's, got something wrong with his hip, or one leg's longer than the other. And then I'll say, so here's something I want you to know about Eric. He's climbed the 7 highest mountains on Earth, 7 continents, 7 mountains, 7 highest on this planet. And here's what you need to know about Eric. He's blind. So it comes down to it. And I tell him that. I'm telling you this to mess with your head. Because the next time you tell yourself about what you think you can do or what you think you can't do, if a blind man can climb the 7 highest mountains on Earth, what can you do? So just be true to yourself. To thy own self be true, as we say in AA.
Write this down. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, Eric. I'm not following Dave with that. Yeah, nah, man. Nah. See, Dave, he does this, right? He does this thing. We're going to go write this down. He puts me behind someone like you, and you drop all these nuggets and boulders, and I'm just, okay, now I got to try to come on,
Ted, you got this, bro. Come on, man. You got it.
I mean, I think just what I just heard you say a couple minutes ago about, I guess, those 2 important times in your life, I guess, being born and then like kind of getting to that why place, like kind of understanding that, because oftentimes you hear people trying to figure that out, right? And it's not like what is it, and I don't think I ever was like, what is the why? Like you went to school and I worked and and then I decided to be an entrepreneur, and and if you asked me that question back then, tell what's your why, I mean I wouldn't have been able to answer it, right? But going through entrepreneurship for 20 plus years and ups and downs of it, right? Because most people see the ups, right? And they say, oh man, this is great, you got this, you got that, and they just don't know all the things that you go through to get there. And I had a buddy and a couple guys I know that are entrepreneurs, and oftentimes you hear one will say, oh man, you still in this, right? Like, and they're entrepreneurs, right? And they're most very successful. Like, you're still in this, you're not ready to just get rid of this yet. For me, it's Dave, Eric, I love the game. Like, I enjoy the game. The game gets me going. Like, I'm like, oh man, I know these guys have sold their company. What would I do? I'd do it again. I'd do it again. Like, I just can't see just being like, oh, I'm good, and I'm gonna just sit on a beach and no, I'd do it again.
Yeah.
And so I think the why is, yeah, I love the strategy. I love working with people. I love being able to. It's not a money thing. So there's never going to be any amount of money that's going to make me stop. Right? I could have made a lot more money working for some people. Right? Because once you get this mindset that you're going to just get it done, you can take that and work with anybody, right? To just whatever it is, it's nothing that's going to stop me.
Nope.
Right? So I love the game, Dave. I love the game, Eric. That's it, man. I mean, I enjoy. It's never over. You win a deal. Okay, when's the next deal? Okay, we lost someone. Okay, that's fine. When's the next one?
It's a numbers game, man.
We
know that, right? We know it's numbers.
Yeah.
You got to focus on the process, and I think when you get to that point, when you really fall in love with the process itself, you can't lose.
That's right. You wanna be an entrepreneur. I mean, it's in you. Like I always use this example of the growing up with the Rubik cube, and Dave, I couldn't do it. I didn't see some people, they get it and they put it together, put it down, doing a couple. I'd have the hardest time with that, but I kept picking it back up. So this business thing is like a big Rubik cube, man. I'm just gonna keep picking it back up and enjoy it and enjoy the journey. And that's so you get to that
it's a pattern, right? The Rubik's cube is a pattern. You just got to follow the pattern, right? And so recognizing the pattern, and that's what's so cool. It's what we've been talking about. Understanding patterns and how they work is so important. It's critical. Such a big deal.
And then when we have, 20 years ago, I was thinking, oh man, a podcast. There was no podcast. We weren't thinking about podcast. But to think that I'd be in a place now where we're meeting, amazing people all the time, like yourself, and just hearing your perspective, like every day is kind of like that match that just kind of just keeps lighting me. Like, okay, I can't quit now. I just listen to Dave. Dave says I can't quit. I'm back at it.
Dave's walking on coals.
Yeah, he's walking on coals. I don't know if I'm
man,
walking on coals, but I'd like to watch it. I'd definitely watch it.
Yeah.
Hey, Ted, take those boots off. Take those boots off.
Yeah, right. I have a really good friend of mine who's he's done everything firefighting. He actually retired in LA County. He was a divisional fire chief, and he did it all, right? Everything that you could do as a firefighter, he did. Paramedics, he did training. He was a head instructor at El Camino Firefighter Academy. He was the president of the union. I mean, he did it all, right? 14 years of paramedic. And so I've been on him all these years, right? When you come into a firewalk, when you come into a firewalk, when you come into a firewalk, right? And so one day he goes, okay, I'll do it. And I go, are you serious? He goes, yep, I will. I'll come. Under one condition. Okay. What's that? He goes, I can do it in my turnouts. Right. He's going to leave his boots on and he's going to leave his gear on. He wasn't going to, he's going to walk across them with his turnouts. It was hilarious.
That's right.
Wow. Yep.
Yeah.
So my piece for this write this down segment is just this idea that everything you want is on the other side of fear. Right. And so I've learned when let's say I have a big speech, let's go, the room's packed, everything else, that feeling that I feel beforehand a lot of times, I'm sure it's similar to when you're about to walk across hot coals. It's just kind of that similar fight or flight thing. But I've learned that that's a signal for me. Whenever I feel that fight or flight, that's a signal that that's something I have to do. And I think you just have to reprogram some of those fears or some of those butterflies that you feel before you're about to do something. It could be even if you're having a difficult conversation that has to happen, right? That's something you have to do. That's something you have to get on the other side of, because all the good stuff is on the other side of that. Yeah. The same thing with the firewalk. When you get on that other side, you feel like a completely different person. And I think that's the key.
Can I throw one more thing in there to write it down? Since you brought that part up, Eric, and that is, so this is a really easy trick, and it's really not a trick. It's just a pattern interrupt skill set, if you will. How do you break through that fear? How do you stop the fear? Well, what I've learned is fear is exhilaration, without the breath.
Mm.
Right? So when you're fearful, what do? You stop breathing. So here's write this down. You want to overcome fear? Breathe. Take 3 cleansing breaths. And I mean, I'm talking get that oxygen up, stand up straight, get your lower part of your lungs up, your diaphragm, and take a big giant breath of air all the way down and hold it. Count to like 10. Exhale. Do it again. Do it again. And when you come into or out of that third breath, guess what? Fear goes bink. Just like that. Works every time. It's a really powerful way to get anyone to step through fear. Because I do it at the Firewalk. I walk kids. My daughter was 6 years old first time she firewalked. My son was 9. I have a lot of companies that come to me and they're like, hey, can our kids, yeah, absolutely. Get the kids out there. They're easier than the parents. The parents are scared to death. They've been going through life with all these limiting beliefs, right?
Right.
So yeah, and I just I've got some in mind that I'll never forget these kids, and I just get them to breathe, interrupt the pattern, and on the third breath, I'll tell them, okay, when we exhale, I'm going to say 3, 2, 1. Who was it? Mel Robbins that put that out there? Maybe it was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever it was.
Yeah,
she says, you want to do something and you're hesitant, just count backwards. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And it works. It's like works. You can't get out of bed in the morning. Count backwards. 3, 2, 1, out. Right? Put your shoes on to go to the gym. 3, 2, 1, put your shoes on. It's really a powerful tool. It works really well. It works great. I love it.
It does. Well, Dave, thank you for being a fantastic guest.
Are you kidding me?
Great guest.
Thank you so much. Man, it's such an honor to be here with you guys. So much fun.
How can the people best connect with you?
Okay. Just go to our website. It's firewalkadventures.com. And so everything's there. The academy's there. There's information about that. All my contact stuff, the firewalks, the glass walks, all the different things that we do. Whether you want to come to us and let us train you how to do this stuff, or you go, nope, Dave, ain't interested. I'll write you a check. You do it. You put it on. You clean it up, and then we'll take the benefit. Yeah, we can do that for you too. So firewalkadventures.com. All
right. Firewalkadventures.com. Make sure you check Dave out. All right. This has been an amazing episode of the 30-Minute Hour podcast. Don't forget that you can go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and any of those places. And don't forget to subscribe to this show. That way you never miss an episode. It just automatically comes to you. And don't forget to share the show.
That's
right.
Share the show.
Secret.
I'm there.
Yeah. Gotta share the show.
Yeah.
All right.
This is great. You don't want to miss these great guests like Dave.
I'm telling you.
Man.
Podcasts are important, people. Let's, feed your mind with positivity. Grab those pearls on these podcasts. This is a really, really great way to learn and grow and inspire, man. Podcasts are amazing. And you guys are killing it.
Oh man, thank you so much. That's great.
Appreciate you,
yeah,
sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, that is our time for this week. And until next time, have a great one.